What are you interested in? Why did you come along today? What was it that you liked the sound of that made you interested in doing it? Anybody? Volunteer.
Yeah, can you go in the hall, please, with it? It's quite loud.
Oh. Also,
I'll go for you,
Zoom
Leo.
to the automatic mute, by the way. I might just mute everybody, and
Yeah,
you
you
can
probably
unmute
should.
yourselves.
Can you hear me, Leo?
Yeah, you can unmute yourselves there. I might have muted you now, Tanya, but you can unmute yourself.
I can jump in. I'm always really keen to hear positive stories of smart solutions and constructive action being taken in this sort of space, and I think that this is hopefully one of those. You're laughing at me, Leo, but yeah, it's nice to hear can-do stories and be inspired by that.
Yeah, I was trying to coin the phrase doom-splaining.
I like that. I saw that the other day.
It didn't go as viral as I
chuckle.
hoped, but you know, we keep trying.
Doom-splaining, yeah, but there's a lot of that around, isn't there? So yeah,
that's when you basically tell everyone how dead we are from climate chaos, basically.
There is a balance there, though, isn't there? Because I think you've got to. I'm fully of the sort of Buddhist mindset that you have got to embrace good strategy is embracing the brutal reality of where you are. I think there is something in that, but you've then got to have the other bit, which is the militant optimism, and there's always got to be a balance.
Yeah. I think in my set, I think for me, EdenLab is kind of a coping strategy from the craziness of having. I read this great quote last week. I'll tell you who it is afterwards, because I think he might be a Nazi. But anyway, the quote was, when you look into the abyss looks back into you. And I felt that's happened to me. I did this Cambridge course into sustainability, and then I looked into the abyss and it was pretty deep and pretty dark. And after that, I could never really not be involved in this going afterwards, because I sort of, it affects you somehow that you can't forget it. Maybe you could, but I couldn't. So here we are, basically.
No, I think there's something in that. I think there is something in that.
It was by Nietzsche. I'm not sure if Nietzsche is sort of acceptable or not. I don't know about philosophy, to be honest.
I think he's usually a bit of a downer, but I don't think he's a Nazi. Or maybe he is. Maybe.
This wasn't on my script, by the way, but I've been thrown by the Zoom thing. Okay, so I think what we might do is, for a start, to anyone who made it across platforms, you are an amazing, agile virtuoso of the internet, and I appreciate you sticking it out and getting here. Had a bit of trouble with the LinkedIn, so I might rethink the format. But this was like the guinea pig event, so I appreciate you being here. And I think we'll have a nice, intimate conversation. It's definitely, the plan is that we'll have a chat and we can invite you in as we go, but probably more towards the end as well. And the idea of not being on video is, if you want to be on video, that's cool. If you don't, you're happy to turn it off and get on with something else in the kitchen or wherever you are, or carry on with your work or whatever you're doing, but you're welcome to. I should probably introduce who's here. So I think most of you, I've met lots of you. My name is Leo Raymond, and I'm the founder and CEO of a relatively new business called EdenLab, more of which in a little bit. And I'm joined by my willing co-host and amazing sacrificial guinea pig who made the effort to get here, and after quite a lot of effort is still with me, Mark Bjornsgaard. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, and we're going to tell the whole story, but tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, okay. I won't do that. I'll try to do a very brief potted history. At the moment, I'm the chief exec of Deep Green. That was somewhat accidental, and prior to this, I was running a startup incubator called System 2, where over the years we developed a process by which we managed to get corporates to actually build businesses, which, as we all, or some of us know, is quite a difficult thing to do. And so we own a care business with British Gas called Lifted. We owned a business with GSK in the US called Alligator, and we have a bunch of other investments. So over the last sort of 15 years, I've been at the coalface of trying to bring a different lens to entrepreneurship. I'm sure we'll geek out on that. But my story is, and for the last 8 years, we've been more and more focused on the energy transition. So we own a bit of a business called Caldera, which is a heat battery business. We've sold EV subscription service business called Elmo to BCA. So we're energy folk, and now we've trespassed into the data center world, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But so I've never had a sensible job. Well, actually, I did. I had a sensible job for 9 months, but that didn't end well. And I was, in another life, I was Peter Andre's product manager. So and that I've never confessed to. In fact, the friend who we set up Human Digital, which is sold to M&T Saatchi, he calls me Papum. So yeah, there's another life.
You did have, but you had a career in the recording industry, right? That was part of your background.
I definitely wouldn't go so strong as say career. That would be putting it very, very strongly. But I enjoyed my 20s playing in bands. Yeah, right. And I always used to think that was bad, because people would sort of frame you as this sort of slightly chaotic, crazy person. But actually, I was talking to another venture capitalist, and he's got guitars in his at the back of his Zoom calls, and he says no, it's structure and it's discipline and it's trying to get to an end product. And actually, maybe that's right. Actually, maybe that is right.
That's definitely some post-rationalization, perhaps. I was always drawn to you for 100 reasons, but one of them definitely was there was something of rock and roll ethos around how you'd gone about what you'd done, I thought. And I've made this amazing long brief. That's why I sent you that book about Rick Rubin's music recording.
I love that.
Kind of cultural, because I was thinking about that as like a way of thinking about it.
Yeah. That book is brilliant. I read it and then immediately passed it on to my daughter, because it gave you permission. Yeah, it would give everyone permission to be creative, and for it not to be a linear process of a tortured genius. It was just, again, it's somewhat to this process, it's just graft, actually, a lot of it.
I'm going to drop it. That was definitely not on the plan, and it just proves that I'm following the conversation, Mark, rather than just like leaping from thought to thought. But I'm going to try and drop it into the chat. So that book title, because you might, where is it? You might enjoy it, some of you. It's actually quite a good read. There's a long link to a review there. So anyway, that's done. So, well, perhaps onto the topic of the day, really. So the plan for this series is it's called The Great Transition. And I'm quite frustrated, really, because maybe that's my life, really. But I feel like the post-carbon, post-sort of fossil fuel world is already being born all around us. Often it's struggling to be born, as I'm bastardizing a quote from a guy called Gramsci there.
Yeah.
But the point is that not everyone can see it. Not everyone sees it, I don't think. And I think it's quite easy, because it's obscured by the regular old world that lives alongside it, to kind of forget that it's there or not realize that it's there. But to me, it's like, it's going to be, without a doubt, it's going to be the biggest thing that any of us are going to experience. I like to think, and it's, we can argue about this, I suspect this great transition to a world that isn't reliant on fossil fuel, that isn't built in the same way as the old world was, in terms of society, in terms of consumption, in terms of business, in terms of politics. I think the level of change that's coming is kind of as big as the Industrial Revolution. I think it's possibly even as big as the Renaissance. That's a big, bold claim. And in some ways, I think it probably needs to be for us to still be around in 100 years' time, but we can discuss the credibility of that. But that's the point of this series. And then rather than spending all our time doomsplaining and worrying about hand-wringing at how awful it all is, which, it is to many extents, I wanted to spotlight people, the stories of people, Mark, you've volunteered to be the first, who have done something about it, or who are doing something that may point towards and should point towards what that new world will look like and how it'll come together. So that's the premise of the event. Mark, before I go any further, is there anything you want to react to in what I've said so far?
No, I think you're right. It's going to be quite binary. We're either going to reach the sunlit uplands, or it could, it could be something different. And that, again, we're sort of back to that balance, that idea of the Stockdale paradox, where we have to hold these two conflicting things in our minds. So yeah, I'm with you. And once we can shed a lot of old habits, then the future could be super interesting and very positive. But as you say, that whole phrase of being cursed to live in interesting times, my God, we are be living in interesting times.
What is this? What is this Stockdale paradox thing? I saw you mention it in our.
I love this. It's Jim Stockdale, 1960s POW in Vietnam. If you walk into, he noticed that if you were a POW, you walk in, you go, brilliant, we're going to be out by Christmas, it's all going to be fine. You'll die because your hope was broken because you weren't out by Christmas and you couldn't accept the reality of the situation. On the other hand, the people who came in and said, I'm dead, I'm never going to get out of here, they also never made it. The people who made it were the people who could hold the two conflicting realities and really hold them in their minds and be deeply immersed and embedded in both. One which is, I'm having a horrible time in a prisoner of war camp, but there is hope that I will be out of this. And I think if we can all just get on that narrow ridge, that's the only place you can really kind of survive. Otherwise you're doomed. Otherwise you're in doom, the pit of doom, or you're just saying it's all going to be fine, and plainly it's not.
Yeah, that's really, I love that. I love that. Because I'm really quite interested in this idea, as you probably see, and I guess we'll talk about it now, but the whole point of this transition between one state and the other, the state of relying on fossil fuel and all the sort of economic system and political system that sits around that, versus one which is more renewable and more regenerative. And I mean, I'm not sure sustainable is even good enough anymore. Seems like something where you have to live between two states. Two states of being. And maybe we'll explore a bit. Maybe we'll talk a bit more about the company that you built and why and how in detail. And then we can talk about what it meant and how you worked through it and get to that. Because I'm really interested in some of the psychology of it, really, because I think that's what
that phase change. There's a brilliant book called Loon Shots, and the whole idea of phase change, which you've got to keep a business somewhere between ice and water. You know, and if you go too far one way, then it doesn't work. I think the other thing that jumped to mind as you were speaking was this is systems thinking, not linear. What we've had for 250 years is just extractive and exploitative and linear. So we've all been able to understand it. What we also need, I mean, I'm a militant atheist, but we also need some faith that when we create positive systems like we have done or we're trying to do in Deep Green, then the world changes around you in ways that you can't possibly imagine. There's that brilliant quote that I think it's Goth or whoever it is, or whatever it is. It's, you know, when you start to change, things change around you. And I think we have to believe that that's going to happen.
That's really interesting. A ripple effects in a pond or something of making your move.
Yes, yeah, it is. I actually printed it out because I wanted to reference it. I think there's a real, you have to suspend your belief. You have to suspend your belief and trust that some sort of positivity in the world has knock-on effect and the systems change. Yeah. So
look, let's get to the origin story of Deep Green particularly. Now, I know that you're one of the very few people in the world that we've inhabited sort of jointly over the years that actually has successful exits under your belt in terms of not just kind of pretending the theatre of corporate venturing, but actually getting stuff built and made and developed. So I get that. Were you a tree hugger and then suddenly you decided, right, I'm going to go and try and find a way to reuse the heat from data centers? Or how did you get to like, right, I'm going to do this? What kicked it off?
Not a tree hugger, but I love to explore grey areas. So I've always been attracted to problems that are thorny and are difficult and are brain chemistry related. And so that's Deep Green for me is somewhat different to other businesses I've invested in as much as it is this weird anomaly, I think. I mean, I think you can build a dental plan business that we did for GSK, or you can build a care. Yeah, these things are relatively understood and known, but they don't have this sort of this essence that Deep Green has, which is this love and reciprocity at the middle of it.
Yeah.
Like when you give something away for free, you get richer and the world gets better. I've always been, that's why I've always loved it. Always loved the core of the business.
But did you start with, did you just know that there was like excess heat and that was a waste and waste is bad? Or what? How did it get to plugging it into pools? I mean, how did the whole thing come about like that?
Well, 8 years, started with British Gas. We were trying to impress the chief executive of British Gas. We built this really shonky prototype, and we proved to ourselves at a very, very, very crude level that it was possible. Then British Gas put in a load of money, and then we go through the 3 deaths. You know, every business needs to go through 3 deaths, and
What's
I think
that?
we've
I don't know.
had
I
at
don't
least.
know.
There's this law that you've got to go through the fire of 3 deaths, where everything is lost, but you must still persevere. And that's, you know, we'll get into the kind of psychology of entrepreneurship. And sometimes you must quit. There are points at which it's a shit idea, just don't do it. But this is so self-evidently not a shit idea. You can't really abandon it.
Right.
You know, it was something I just couldn't abandon.
I wonder whether that, because this is difficult and new and unheard of until you have to do it, that there needs to be, you need to have some kind of psychological disposition to just being able to persevere.
I think you do. I think that's what entrepreneurship is. It is this, again, we're back to Stockdale, but it is this ability to hold those two, both. I mean, we talked about it in terms of the energy transition, but it's the same is exactly true of being an entrepreneur, which is you've got to be able to kill your favorite idea, which so few entrepreneurs can, whilst at the same time holding the belief that you might be successful. And who knows where that is. Many people stop before they should, and many people persevere far longer than they should. So it's not an exact science.
Yeah, it sounds tough. I think I guess most people on here will have checked out the link and will know a bit about Deep Green, but I wonder whether it's worth you doing just a minute on what it is and why it's great.
Well, sure. Okay. Well, I'll give you the sales pitch. So computers get hot, and if you could possibly take the heat that computers generate, you could use them for another purpose, that heat for another purpose. So energy is not lost, it's just converted into something different. Data centers, these massive barns in the middle of nowhere that run the cloud, are already about 2% of the world's electricity supply. They're going to hog between 10 and 15% of the electricity supply of the world. And in the transition, in this next 20 years, they're simply not going to have enough. We're not going to have enough electrons to go around. So what Deep Green does is, in my head, my simplistic head, is that we reuse the electrons. We use them twice. Computers are brilliant electric heaters. They convert 97% of the electricity that goes into a computer comes out as heat. So all we do is capture that heat and then put it somewhere for social good. So in our case, we provide that heat for free to swimming pools and other places where you can do that. Now, the reason why that's clever is because the data center industry currently spends between 20 to 50% of its OPEX trying to keep the computers cool. So if you spend £1 trying to powering a computer in a data center, you tend to spend 50p, another 50p trying to keep it cool. If you do it our way, you spend nothing trying to keep it cool. So you make more money because you have less cost, and then you can also create a huge social good.
So cheaper, less wasteful, socially beneficial. I mean, I think that's like the dream case study. I don't know why the Cambridge course isn't teaching it. They probably are now. That's the dream intersection and that quite rare really to find those examples.
That's what I mean about the business. Yeah, when you kind of hear about it, you can't not hear it. A bit like you, Leah, when you know, there's a point in life when you just can't not. And Microsoft actually wrote the white paper on this. They coined the phrase data furnace in 2011, I think it was. And so now we're at the point where, I mean, 8 years ago when we were starting to experiment, no one would take us seriously. But then 3 years ago, we spent £2 million building a supercomputer in Exmouth Leisure Centre and proved it was possible. Because everyone said, it's more expensive, it's more difficult, you'll never do it. So you had to, and I think that's one of those principles that we might come back to again, which is you can talk all you like, stop fucking about, just get on with it.
Which is not really the defining characteristic of the sustainability world right now, I would say.
It's difficult because a lot of sustainability comes down to shuffling chemicals around new processes. The reason why it's possible with this is because everything's fungible, everything's commoditized. There are massive supply chains. It doesn't. Octopus could invest because there was no debate about the technology. You could just go.
Yeah, right.
It was just so to be fair to a lot of other businesses in the transition and a lot of green businesses, there's a lot of technical risk. There's still a lot of supply chain risk. With Caldera, we've got a massive factory on the south coast. We already need a factory 10 times the size. You know what I mean? Whereas deep green, all you need is just to put in £1 billion worth of orders to NVIDIA. Job done.
And have the pool experiments gone down well with the swimmers? I mean, do they know about it, or is it sort of not on their radar, that story?
I mean, it's not. We go to a data center conference now, and everyone high fives us. We're the sort of pool guys, and we launched dressed as lifeguards. Right? We're trying to bring a bit of joie de vivre in what can be a very grey. I mean, sheds full of computers. Everyone says, "Oh, can I come and see your data?" Why the fuck would you want to come down to a container in the middle of by a lift? I mean, you knock yourself out if you want to, but the practical reality of it is much less charming than the benefit of. So every pool we land in, we save about £80,000 we give them £80,000 of free energy every year. So that's brilliant, right? I mean, who doesn't want that?
Yeah, amazing. I think it's a brilliant idea, and it's scaling now, and it's getting. I mean, you've got a lot of coverage in all the main titles. It's been talked about.
Yes, and now Octopus. So we didn't talk about. We launched to great fanfare, but then you need to play this game, play any game in the transition. You need, and this is we might talk a little bit about the book Limits to Growth, but in the Limits to Growth in the 90s, when it was written, wherever it was 50 years ago, of all of the meta bits that we need for the transition to take place, actually capital is the one thing that you cannot not have. And so it is for deep green. It's a 3.4 trillion retrofit across Europe to do this. So, the one factor in Limits to Growth, there are something like 9 scenarios, and a bit like, there's only one get out of jail in Limits to Growth, but the one scenario where we don't die is where capital keeps investing. Because if we lose capital, if we lose the faith of money, we can kiss goodbye. It's gone.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you and I went to an event. Yeah, that's where I met you, actually, where they were telling us about the insurance industry and how they're reacting to the number of fires and their premiums.
Yes.
They said something about they had all the capital, but they couldn't find places to invest it. I don't know.
That's true.
I'm not sure. Is that what you reckon? There's not enough deep green.
No, that is true. Yeah, funds are brimming over with money. It's just, the trouble is, if I run something, if I'm a fund, I want to give you billions every month. And if you can't suck up, if you can't scale like that, I can't compute. Yeah, I can't work with you. Yeah.
Well, that's given me hope, I think, probably about.
Yeah. But we need to keep capital on side. Yeah.
So tell me, I mean, I get that, and we'll maybe come back to some of the system changes at the end a little bit. But do you think this transition is real? Do you see it? Where do you see it? Other places other than the world that you're operating in? Do you spot it around? Am I crazy?
We're doing something wrong, because there's still too many parts per million in the atmosphere, right? Like, it's not taken effect yet.
No.
So I think we've got to crack on now. That's for sure. So I see it in pockets. I suppose, like everyone, I'm sure, like you certainly see it in pockets, and it's great to see. I was reassured by some analysis recently that said, no, it's all right. An electric car really is better for the environment. And, there's a lot of solar going up and wind farms that are there. But the gears that we now need to move through are sizable. So we now need to be, all of us, wherever we are in it, we've got a motor now. We can't, and that urgency needs to come into the environment. And actually, in my view, the transition needs to stop letting a lot of the time perfect gets in the way of good, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, and I think I see it in the own engineering teams of businesses I invest in, or I see them. It's like, it's good enough, just ship the fucking thing. You know what I mean? Like, again, we're back to the world changes when you change, but the world's not going to change if it doesn't come out of the factory and somebody experiences and uses it.
Yeah, I love the practicality of that, the simplicity of it. And that perfectionism is, I guess it's different in an engineering team. I can understand from like a company point of view, maybe a company that's from the old world, which I guess the majority are. There's a real paranoia about putting something out and being seen to be only half involved, or not having thought it through enough, or discovering you've made a mistake. I mean, it's not like the internet revolution where it was okay to fail and fail fast. I mean, there's some bad outcomes of that as well, but at least you could share and learn. Where it seems in this world, it's kind of frowned.
Yeah.
Worries me.
In my mind, and we talked about this a lot earlier, but in my mind, literally everything a corporate does to try and make new products and services is wrong. It across the board. I mean, in every conceivable facet, everything that McKinsey or Bain or Boston tell you to do, just run in the opposite direction. It's total bullshit.
Give me some examples that you think are particularly worth ignoring, or whatever. What makes you say that?
I mean, take your pick. I mean, for my old system 2 days, I've got the list. I literally have the list. So I mean, go wide. No, don't go wide. Ideas. I never use an idea. If you haven't got a hypothesis, forget it. So you've got to. The whole idea of having a brainstorm of ideas is just bullshit. Everyone can play. No, they can't. Fire everyone. Like, do it in the team of 3 people. Oh, we've got to be on brand. No, you haven't. Do it out of the limelight. Do it out of the shadows. Research is brilliant. No, it's not. It's an absolute innovation killer. Just never talk to research ever. Never do that. Stop. Well, the biggest one is don't build any technology. Everyone assumes that your job as an entrepreneur in the first phase of your business is to build something. Wrong. Completely not. Don't do that. Don't do that. For 7.5 years in Deep Green, we built nothing.
Is that true?
Yeah, nothing. I mean, the prototype was a bucket, a homebrew bucket full of massage oil with a crypto miner in it. I mean,
for a long time, such a long time.
Yeah, but the 4th prototype was 4 NVIDIA cards in a shitty data center in Horsham, pretending to Disney that we built it to see whether they would use it. Thank God we didn't spend any more money than that, because they didn't.
I love that.
I mean, it goes on and on. It's everything, every conceivable facet of corporate innovation, which is why if you want to do it within a corporate, you have to ask yourself some really awkward questions about yourself before you probably, you certainly have to anchor wherever you're doing. You have to anchor wherever you're doing it in a corporate situation. You have to anchor the business in you're going to do something very, very different. And that's the only, and we've talked about this a lot. That's the only reason why we were successful, because we had just the blind luck of bumping into a few people who'd seen it work and then let us off the leash.
That's really interesting. And I guess because not everyone on this call, but some of them are definitely working in spaces where they are in big organizations, controlled often in even a different geography. And that's interesting, because if you're, it's more than the theory, it's your experience is true for everybody, then all these big companies are going to be crashing into ultimately an inability to achieve the goals they're setting themselves on transition, unless something much more radical is unleashed inside them or somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, well, you can see it in the data of average life expectancy of a business on the FTSE 100. That life expectancies have gone from 60 years to 15 or something. So we know whatever's happening isn't working, and the hope is that those outside the organization, I think this is probably true, that the access to capital, ability to launch and fail fast means that more and more people can do it outside of the corporate shell. That's not to say corporates don't have a role to play, because once you're trying to scale something, then all of those good processes of compliance and regulation and making sure you don't, you do things properly, they do come into play. So that you need the corporate mindset at a certain point in time, but just not at the beginning.
And I wonder, like, because one of the things we do at EdenLab is with some success, I think, is we're often asked to do this, but we kind of help our customers and clients think about the world in the 2030s and 2040s. And we do it in ways that are both charming and challenging, so provocative. And sometimes we'll say, well, if we're lucky, there might be some abundant energy, but probably not. And if we're unlucky, there'll be an incredible level of frugality. We'll be very frugal because we'll be eating our own tomatoes from our own back garden and trading them and, whatever else. And there'll be no chocolate, or whatever, whatever the scenarios are.
Yeah.
But the reason we do it is, and I've noticed this a few times, is it frees people to imagine the future in a way, and it sort of seems to unlock them from the assumptions that block them today. Have you been that sort of visionary? Do you need to be a visionary person? Have you been that visionary person, or what do you think about that sort of aspect of figuring out what comes next?
I think we need. I mean, anyone who's got visionary on their LinkedIn profile, stop it. It's like, are you Elon Musk? Because if you're not, take it off. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I think I'm maybe more cynical and more practical, but I don't think there is such a thing as business strategy. I think there is strategy by experimentation. I think there is a militant, diligent. Life is just a derivative. It's just minimizing the downside and maximizing the upside. And my experience says that is true. And so I think when it comes to vision, you can have a view of where the world might go, and that might anchor people in it. But ultimately, you've got to not go bust next month, right? Yeah, so it's a very, the first rule of business is make something that people want to buy. I think so few people, so few entrepreneurs, I think a lot of people forget that. And that's why, and Deep Green, I talk a lot about waiting in the waves. We waited in the waves for 8 years.
And when you mean waiting in the waves, as in until the time comes and it's right to kind of push it up?
Yeah, because the chances are, on balance of probabilities, is your idea a killer idea? No, it's a shit idea. But there's a chance that it might be a good idea in another environment. It might be a good idea when the world has changed for whatever reasons, in all the billions of ways it could change. So it's very tempting to feel like it's got to go now, but it's probably just the time's not right.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And being ready, I guess, to leap when it is, and having some other irons in the fire, maybe.
Always hedge. Yes. Yeah.
So we've talked about a few things about, because I'm very keen to try and explore more of the, for the guys on this call and for people that end up reading what we write on the back of it and so on, like practical tips and tricks. Makes it sound small, but I guess ways of being. A bit like if you were writing the Rick Rubin book on the creative act, but the transitionary act of knowing how to be green and make it successful. What else might be some of the things that would be in there on the the reflections that we should go and read every day when we read the book?
I've actually written it. I have written a book. It's called How to Define a Value Hypothesis. It's like there's no book on the Amazon web store that has value hypothesis in the title, because it's the most boring bit of innovation. But it's the most important, and it's the bit that everyone forgets to do. But actually defining what you're trying to learn and then going to try and learn it is the single biggest, most important thing anybody doing this can try and do. And our brain chemistries can conspire to make that very hard for us all to do. It's so many people, so many people who are trying to build a business are committed to their idea. That is a no-no. One's if it's not the best idea in the world. What's the percentage likelihood of anybody's idea being the best, perfect articulation of what your business will be in 5 years' time? 0. But if you talk to 99.9% of entrepreneurs, they will tell you with straight to your face that it's the right thing. And you get no brownie points for saying, I haven't got a fucking clue really, but I think it's this hypothesis I want to test.
So that's really, that's twofold, challenging on two folds, I think, for this the great transition shift. On the one hand, in the face of all the overwhelming gravitational pull to do nothing and bury your head in the sand and carry on as normal and buy those trainers and cook that beef and go on holiday on the plane.
Yeah.
Then you do need some kind of visionary pull. I won't use that word, but you need some kind of conviction to drive you forward in the face of that stuff. And yet, I think what's interesting is how dangerous that can be. So that's a really fine and tight tension. And then the other one, I think, is that, you know, that if everyone's spending, I think I really love your idea that it's not going to be, you know, you don't necessarily know what it is, but you're going to test and learn your way to get there. But I think you said define what you want to learn and then go and learn it. And what I feel about the sustainability crew in corporates particularly is that they're not defining what they want to learn and going to learn it. They're spending 99.9% of their time trying to measure with increasing levels of accuracy what's gone on in the past. So it's like the most perfect rear view mirror in the world.
Yeah. Yes.
And I understand the need to demonstrate that you're doing something and you know what your baseline is. But don't you worry about if that's the setup we've got, how the fuck are we ever going to get to a place where transition actually happens at scale?
Yeah, that's kind of my point about research. Like, I think we assume the world is going to always be the way it is. That's what we do as humans, and we can't conceive. Another piece of advice might be just to assume a black swan all the time, because life is always just you're gonna think you're in the middle of the intersection and it's fine, and then the truck is gonna hit you, and it always hits you. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like the definition of life is that the truck hits you in the middle of the intersection, right? So yeah, it's very hard to accept that. It's very hard to accept that lack of agency. And that is that we are back to the kind of die before you die sort of acceptance of it. There is a hands off you need once you're in flight to learn, but then you've got to see the data. I mean, I've spectacularly failed to communicate my process to most entrepreneurs I've worked with, because even if you get them to the stage where they're prepared to test their idea, even when they get data back that says this is a fundamentally shit idea, no one wants it, it is going to cost you money and you're going to fail, people can't go, okay, I accept that, I'm just going to pivot, or I'm going to do something else. It's very hard to do that, because most entrepreneurs and most people in the transition, it's bound up in their identity. They can't abstract the idea from their identity.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I feel like it's good in terms of diagnosis of challenge. I am feeling more anxious about society, business, politicians, environmentalists even's ability to get that level of distance from the problem to be able, I guess it'll be forced upon us, frankly.
No, we need to teach it. We can teach it. It's teachable. I figured it out from being taught it, the brutal lesson of lives, but you can teach it. And it is really the dirty secret is it's just therapy. All therapy is just acceptance of where you are rather than trying to pretend where you're not. And so it is just, this is just the how to define a high value hypothesis can apply to the transition, it can apply to a business, but it can also apply to ourselves. You've got, like, the key to living a colorful and accepting life is to accept your situation, right? So we probably just need more therapists.
Yeah, that's definitely an AI resilient and climate friendly job.
Yeah, right. Come on. Yes.
Maybe that's my pivot.
Yeah. Well, I think that comes back, yeah. I think you've got to attend to yourself in this. It's such a brutal game. There's so much blood is spilt, and you take so many bruises that you've genuinely got to attend to yourself. Like, you know, the 7 mile run, the cold showers, the therapy, the meds. I can't. I mean, I'm not some whiz bang entrepreneur, but I can't do it without that.
Yeah,
I don't know how anybody else.
You talked to me about that before, and I went on a bit of a health kick just after. It was good. Didn't last. But I'm going to get back on it.
I don't know. Maybe that's why tech bros are all like really fit and ripped. Maybe there is something in it. Maybe if you're just, the more fit and ripped you are, the more successful you'll be. Maybe it's that way around.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Maybe
I hope not. I hope not. So listen, in a bit, I'm going to in a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask people to, if they want to ask any questions, and I suspect there's quite a lot of reaction to what you said, and then we'll move on and get on with our evening or our lunchtime, depending on which country we're in. But I just thought I might ask you a couple of more questions before we finish. And I had one of the ones that I really was kind of keen to put to you, and I've been trying on panels lately, Mark, it seems to work, but in your opinion, what's the one thing no one's really talking about when it comes to making this transition real?
We've covered quite a lot. I think it's changing brain chemistries. It's organizing capital in the right way. It's government. It's regulation. You know, we're just getting into this now, where I mean, certainly in different businesses you've invested in, like, so there are. I think we can be reassured by the fact that we can see most of the plates are turning in our favor, right? You know, there's a hell of a lot of money for it. There's enough people wanting to do it. There's enough solutions, right? We know the solutions are there. We actually know biofuels in planes are hard, but they are there. You know, and sequestration is there. But we kind of know we're there. I guess it's a bit of a get out of jail, but I think what we're saying is that in the next 10 years, it's got to happen now.
Yeah.
And that's where everything that is successful or interesting or gathers attention needs to be championed. And you'd expect me to say that in the case of Deep Green. But I said this at our launch event. Imagine a world we live in where in 5 years' time, our public swimming pools really are heated for free. Like, that will be a really interesting psychological change, right? Like, there'll be something really weirdly different there.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I really, you know, and that's a question.
Everyone's got to do that. You've got to build that love and reciprocity and kindness into business models, I think. And if people won't, then it's got to be regulated in.
That's interesting. I had a conversation with a bunch of students. I was doing a talk at the LSE last week, and I was talking to them about the idea of regenerative leadership and regenerative business models, which I think for me, it's just about models that are going to be healing the environment that the planet that we've messed up. By the way, about 1 person in 100 had heard of regenerative agriculture in that room, which made me slightly I was quite anxious by that result, much though I love them. But which shows us a lot. It just shows you how far that message has yet to spread before people really understand that, because these weren't stupid people. But I think that's really interesting, the provocation to ask questions about the sort of world that's coming and then try and wrestle with it. One of the ones that I've used, but not enough, I think, is how would you find a way that you can make twice as much money, but half the amount of stuff that you're selling or putting through, the material throughput in your business? Right. And I think it's a sort of freeing question, because it's almost impossible to answer right now. But probably if you could answer it, you'd be onto a cracking winner with a really future-proof idea.
Yeah, and then you come back to, do we have to live in a world where we can't compete and where we can't, ego's gone, and where do you know what I mean? Because actually, aren't we, if we're being realistic, aren't we saying that I love competing? Like, ego is there. We're not going to take that out of our DNA in the next 100 years, right? No. So surely we have to harness, there's some kernel of truth in capitalism, even if the modern articulation has led us astray.
I'm 100% with you on that. It depends also whether I think that the lift that's required by the degrowth movement, which is not just reducing consumption and shrinking economies, but also redistributing wealth from north to the south and in general is I like the idea.
Yeah.
It's laudable. I can't imagine seeing it for quite a while yet. In which case, I don't really think I can bear to wait till then. In the meantime, I want to work. For me personally, it's, not everyone has their own system, but mine is to work inside the system and help use the power of businesses to try and make change happen. I like the distinction you make between big corporates being able to genuinely crack a new solution to a problem versus being quite good at scaling it. I think the scaling side of it is important.
Yeah, then we need their brain chemistry. Yeah, I like this idea of the global south. Removals, if they're done well, should galvanize a whole new world, right? We can keep going as long as we're just funneling all of this capital south.
Yeah. So I think maybe we've talked, and I could. By the way, there's so much more depth behind our conversation, but it's a 4-hour conversation, and we're not doing that this evening. And I think if you've written that book, I know you talked about it being written.
I've written it about 5 times, and now I've just taken one chapter, and now it's 90,000 words. And at some point, I'm gonna get it. Yeah. All it is just how to define a value hypothesis. It's just a brain hack to force yourself to be objective. But it's beautifully brutal in its simplicity. Yeah,
I think we'll agree that, and it deserves a wide audience after our conversation today. Guys on the call, thank you for making it tonight despite the tech hurdle. Did anyone want to unmute? Maybe you can raise your hand, or maybe just take a punt and see if you can dare to do it. Someone want to ask a question of Mark?
Hello,
and we'll go through it. Who's that?
Hello,
Matt.
I've got a question. You two are great, by the way. That was brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
I've got a question for Mark. So I totally get it. And the way in which you describe it of going, it's £1 and then it costs you another 50p to cool off. And what I'd love to know is at what point did you decide to use the excess energy to heat pools? I mean, how straight was that journey? Did you go, okay, cool, we can take the excess energy and we could do street lights to reduce crime in urban environments, or we could take the energy to. So at what point did you decide to point that at swimming pools?
The truth is pools are very good heat sinks because they lose a degree of temperature pretty regularly, even in the summer. So it was when you start to think about the problem, pools come into focus pretty quickly. The really exciting bit is that if we do this at scale, we do it for home heating and industrial processes. And what I really love about Deep Green is that it's like the Neville in Harry Potter, because everyone assumes that the get out of jail for decarbonizing heating is going to come from a heat pump or going to come from some really cool kind of bit of tech. Actually, it's this horribly dull industry called the data center industry, which is actually the catalyst for the energy transition. Because when you do this technology with heat pumps, you change the economics of heat pumps to make them economically viable. And you also do for 30% of all industrial processes. So you can imagine a scenario that in 20 years' time, it's not just swimming pools, it's more than 50% of the economy is primed by data centers. No one understands what the hell they are. If you ask 100 people in a room, do you know what a data center is? No one will put their hands up. But there's this geeky, weird, fucking old nag of a horse that is lolloping over the horizon to the rescue of the energy transition, and it's computers in sheds. Like no one knows about. It's brilliant.
So almost swimming pools are almost like a proof of concept, and then the next is basically new build houses with a data center adjacent to it or inside it, and then that data center will heat a house. Okay.
Yes. And antibiotic production and food production and distilleries and wood drying and laundries and basically 30% of all industrial processes. And then you conduct the thought experiment where the cost of carbon goes from 0 and starts to be 250, and then the marginal cost of heat energy goes from whatever it is now to 0. Now that is really that. Imagine a world where the marginal cost of heat energy is zero. I mean, you've properly put a fucking spanner in capitalism and
Yeah.
Very good. I think
Well done. Thank you.
thanks, Matt, and thanks for sharing the post, by the way, to get the thing going. Charlie, you had a hand raised. Raise your hands, guys.
Yeah.
It's an easy way of doing it. Go on, Charlie.
Thanks. Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate it. At one stage, you said we need to teach it, and we can teach it. Two questions for the sake of clarity. Teach what? Is it the value hypothesis point, or is it the broader system point? And secondly, who is doing that, and does it give you optimism in terms of the speed at which people need to learn, or is it a big challenge that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm no guru, but I can explain it to somebody in less than 10 minutes. But then over the course of three or 4 weeks, when you're working with somebody doing it, they either get on their phone a lot more and then get super angry and then storm out, or after the first week, they start crapping on about an idea and you go, no, give me the because, the summer. You just keep smashing their head against the wall until they go, oh shit, he's not going to stop talking about that. And then about 20-30% of people, the light bulb goes off and they go, oh shit, okay, so and then it's okay. And then you're off to the races. So it's just a case of, it's just learning but it's a muscle that we don't have because 2 billion years of evolution have tell us to go the other way. Which is, it's going to be great. Oh, it's a great idea. Brilliant.
So that's very profound, and you're right to point it out, Charlie. Sorry, did you have a follow-up, Charlie, before I?
No. Well, no, I was just going to say, but I mean, can we start to teach that in schools from what age, or is it something that comes, once you're out there in the big bad world?
I'm not sure. I don't know how. I'm not sure it's that profound. I feel like I've bigged it up a lot. We need to to the disciplined approach. We need to experiment. I got the idea off Eric Ries. Eric Ries used to sit people down. He used to pick an unfortunate out of the audience. He used to sit them down when he was presenting and do. But the trouble is, Lean doesn't do this. Lean starts with build something. Lean doesn't start with a boring. Lean starts with the fun, the chocolate cookie, not the boring museum. And you've got to start with the boring museum. So we've done it a couple of times recently. We've done workshops where I've just risked pulling somebody out of the audience, and like full caveat, like it's going to be ritual humiliation because you're just going to come across as I'm going to come across as a dick, and you're going to come across as a clueless, like naive idiot. But between us, we'll prove to the audience that you can do it. But once you do that, you've got to chuck out everything. It's like therapy. You've just got to jettison everything. Like, who wants to do that? Not many people.
Especially not in public.
No.
I think that the reason I say it's profound, I think, is because it's one thing to have a sense of what the technologies and solutions are and where the money should be spent to drive that transition forward. But the big unknown really is the social innovation problem, the human change problem. And if the fundamental skill set of the net, I mean, people have said it a lot, I suppose, but really genuinely being flexible in the face of ultimate chaos coming our way, most likely, and things that we don't, like you just said, things you put something in the system, you don't quite know what's going to happen, and then something else weird happens. And I'm sure we'll see some of that, whether in weather or food or whatever in the coming years, or human behavior in the coming years. So that becomes really much more crucial than it ever has been. Only the flexible survive. Or I think you said, in a way, that ability to hold two ideas at the beginning in your head.
Yeah. It's when we start this whole process, it's like have a great idea and then do it. No, but how I start the process is try and kill everything, and then what survives, maybe build an experiment. That is not a palatable for most people. That is not a palatable. But if we could get over that, if we could reframe it, because I don't think it's a negative thing. I see it as like, what, you got rid of all the shit that was useless and then got to something that's good. That's brilliant. That's amazing, right? But So we probably need to, yeah, it's probably not me that needs, yeah, we need somebody who swears a bit less and a bit more palatable.
Tanya, you've got a question. I can see your hand raised. Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, amazing stuff so far. Thank you so much. I have a question about the boring things, because I always think that's really interesting. And
yeah,
if you look at the sort of energy transition, and actually it seems to me, I could be very wrong, you'll know more, but that having a smart meter in every household actually seems to be a ridiculously critical, boring thing to enable the renewable energy transition. But that small bit of kit sitting in everyone's house is vital. Are
yeah.
there any other things that you see as being boring but vital that behavioral change could be doing sort of now, that people could be doing now?
You say, and I worked on a smart meter project in 2012 with EDF, where we were meant to all have smart meters mandated by 2017, I think it was, and I don't think we all have them yet, do we? So again, from a government regulation point of view, that, as you say, really boring but super important. I think the next really bit of boring technology that everyone needs is a battery, because that again is it. Again, we don't. It's not space lasers. It's not shuffling molecules, but it's back to the point about we kind of know what the solutions are. We just need, yeah. If everyone had a smart meter and a 40 kilowatt battery in their home, we could all do amazing things. Yeah. So I think I guess the point is it's not in the rock and roll, is it? It's really not.
Yeah.
It's not. It is in the difficult, hard, boring slog of changing brain chemistries and deploying quite practical technologies. Yeah, that is where the solutions probably lie. It terrifies me, people geoengineering and that sort of thing. Again, to the systems thinking point of view, I just like, yeah.
I'm with you on that. There was a conversation on the radio recently about, putting small particles into the atmosphere at high altitude to try and reflect the sun, like a volcano does. So it's like a volcano does, except then a volcano goes off, and then what do we do? No more food. So it's kind of I'm with you on which probably gives us a short window of time to make a big difference in order to avoid someone in one state doing something pretty intense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a really good podcast, Danny in the Valley. There's a really good podcast from the chap who's running Deep Sky, and I always remember it because it's Deep Green, Deep Sky, and he's made a lot of money, and he's building an ark in Canada about with all the carbon capture technologies, which he believes the world will need once sea levels are at the point they should be. So last time there was this much water, there's this much carbon in the atmosphere, the sea was 15 meters higher. So he kind of, yeah, there's a practical reality to the world we face into. I'm not sure that's a very good answer to the question, though.
No. Tanya, did you have anything else you wanted to mention?
No, I think I think it's a really interesting way to look across a number of different categories. What's the equivalent of the battery in the sort of in the shopping basket, for example, or the sort of supermarket, or I don't know, it just feels like there's probably more of those quick wins out there if we put our minds to it.
But I think to everything we've said, I'm pretty sure the answer is in brain chemistry, not technology. Do you know what I mean? Like, we kind of know, right? But we've all got to shed all of these habits and all of these acculturement, this stuff around. That's what we've got to shed, right? We've got to fall in love with what makes us human again, and that's going to be difficult. Yeah.
I'm trying to see, that's great. Thank you, Mark. I'm just trying to look at, I think there's a comment in the meeting chat, but I find it hard. I can't, someone's on the tube, I think, when they're doing it. Brett Jacobs is saying that. Great conversation, is what he says anyway. He's keen on the social capital bit. I guess we're probably worth drawing to a close now because we've kept you all for an hour and I'm impressed that you made it, as I said before. Mark, I think, maybe one final question for you, or ask for you, if you don't mind, which I think is this, which is, people who've come to this call today are all interested, they're all engaged. Either they love the sound of Deep Green, or they're interested to hear what you've got to say, or they believe in transition, or they want to find a kind of thing for themselves to kind of get behind and get better at it themselves. If you could sort of exhort people to do one thing or think one thing differently after today, what might that be?
So I hate the idea of leadership, or like I'm pretty sure what I say is mostly nonsense. So I'm terrified of like somebody actually. Yeah, I think we've probably covered it, haven't we? I think it is. If you're going to do it, let's just be really honest about just be really honest about what it is we're doing, and then seek help maybe in getting yourself to the stage where whatever you're doing is useful and interesting. I think a lot of entrepreneurship, Eric Ries himself was fond of saying it, or is fond of saying it, which is, a lot of it's wasted effort because we don't sort of consider enough the endeavor that we're embarking on. I don't think it's. Advice is tricky.
That could be the final quote.
Yeah.
But look, thank you. That was an amazing, as ever, conversation with you, and I really appreciate.
Well, no, thank you for having me on.
Time and being flexible around the tech and that sort of thing. So, and people like Mark Longstaff, the charming and wonderful Mark Longstaff, who you can see on screen, is saying, "Let us know if we can assist in any way," which of course is true. Is there anything that people on this call and the ones that read what I write afterwards could do for you to help?
Just hassle your cloud provider to use Deep Green. All of the cloud providers, they doesn't change their business model in any shape or form other than making them richer to put their kit in our data centers rather than the big barns they're building. So that's what we need everyone to do. And then we are going to do, the caveat of that is that everyone in the back of your mind, you're thinking, it's like, banging the drum in a Geldof way is all very well, but like we are going to do something interesting with the equity in Deep Green, right? It's, we're not, that is a promise. Yeah. We've written some interesting papers on this about what we might do with it, and it doesn't involve buying Ferraris and buying private PJs.
That's very good, very refreshing. I look forward to hearing about that. I mean, someone said you need to have a vision, not just for, well, not a vision perhaps, but you have to know what sort of company you want to create, not just the idea and the model and everything else. So I like the fact that you're thinking about it at that level of depth.
Yeah, but no good deed goes unpunished, and there's no point in saying it until there's something to give away. I've learned that as well. So yeah.
Very true. All right, listen, thank you everybody. We'll be back in some other format fairly soon. I think within a couple of weeks' time we're going to do another one. But I wanted to say thank you, Mark Bjornsgaard, for amazing thoughts and ideas and being so generous with your time and ideas today. I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
See you, gang.